Friends, thank you very much for joining us. I'm doing something slightly different today. I'm having a conversation with Dr. Rhiannon McAleer from the Bible Society. Rhiannon, very good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, good to see you too. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Rhiannon, the reason for talking to you is that you've been responsible, or you've been the lead researcher on this report from the Bible Society, which has come out recently called A Quiet Revival. Um, and it's caused quite a stir, hasn't it?
Oh, it has. Yeah, it's definitely got people talking.
Can you give us a few of the headlines? I know a lot of people viewing this will already see that, but can you just give us some of the, quite exciting and quite encouraging headlines from your survey?
Yeah, absolutely. Bit of background, maybe before we start. Bible
Yeah.
Society has been undertaking large survey work with YouGov for a number of years now. We started back in 2018 with a really large survey of 19,000 adults in England and Wales. That's a representative sample. It's how the population looks, and because it's on that kind of scale, it's really robust. It's considered to be very representative. We've
Mm.
been polling in various ways in between those years for different reasons, but we felt that we needed to do a big update of that 2018 survey. A lot has changed, pandemic, all of these kind of things. So in 2024, towards the end of the year, which was the same time we polled the 2018 survey, we surveyed 13,000 people. So again, massive sample that is much bigger than a typical survey would be, which would be between 1,000 and 3,000 people. And we found some really, really remarkable things. It was surprising. I think that's fair to say. We did a lot of back and forth with YouGov to make sure that nothing really suspicious had happened. But we found, three kind of really key and exciting things. So the first one was that we saw a rise in the number of adults saying they go to church regularly. That had
Right.
gone from 8% of the population in 2018 to 12% now. That in itself is great, but the thing that really, really interested us was that the growth seems to be among young people. So particularly those under 35, where we saw a growth from 4% in 2018 to 16% in 2024. So 16% of 18 to 24-year-olds telling us that they go to church on a regular basis and that they identify as Christian. That's really important. We call these church-going Christians. We also asked a bunch of questions about life satisfaction, so how hopeful you are about the future, whether your life feels meaningful, whether you feel close to people in your local area. These kind of questions, we took them from other surveys that ask these kind of questions, so they're pretty robust as well. And what we found was that there is a really clear pattern that churchgoers seem to have better life satisfaction than non-churchgoers across multiple of these statements. And that was really interesting. I don't know if that's as surprising. Many Christians have commented that, yeah, of course, that's great. But it's really good to see it so clearly in the stats. And this was particularly the case for young Christians as well. So basically, can sum it up as church-going is good for you and it's good for communities. Churchgoers are more likely than non-churchgoers to donate to charity, to volunteer their time, donate to a food bank. So churchgoers make a difference, and that's really cool. But we also
That's brilliant.
saw real spiritual openness and curiosity among the population. We'd noted that in 2018. But the big change for 2024 was that, again, non-churchgoers aged under 35 were showing real openness. So younger adults are more likely than average to say it's a positive thing for Christians to talk about their faith with non-Christians. They're the age group most likely to say they're interested in learning more about the Bible. They're the age group most likely to say they pray regularly and have practiced a spiritual practice. Now, that could be anything. That's not necessarily Christianity. But
Sure.
it does seem that there has been a kind of cultural shift, both reflected within the church and beyond, that Christianity has a place and that people are willing to explore it. So yeah, it's exciting and surprising, perhaps.
That's really fascinating. Thank you. And I'm interested that you were surprised by that as well. So it wasn't as though you were sort of seeking these things out, but actually these things emerged from the statistics, as it were, from the
Yeah.
data. Now, there has been a little bit of sort of pushback. I mean, you've emphasised how good the methodology was in terms of sample size and representativeness and all that kind of thing. And of course, we'd expect someone like an organisation like YouGov to be really good on that. The comment I've heard most commonly, most sort of the question about the method, is the fact that you're asking people to self-report. Do you think that makes the survey vulnerable to bias simply because people don't always say what they do, and what the two things don't always match up?
Yeah, I don't know if I would say it was vulnerable to bias. I would say it's a really fair factor to bear in mind when you're looking at survey data. Surveys are excellent at helping us understand attitudes, and the main purpose of this survey is to understand people's attitudes to the Bible and Christianity.
Right.
When it comes to behaviour, we are reliant on what people tell us. It is known, particularly in the US, I'm not so sure over here, but it is possible that people kind of uplift how often they go to church because they think they should. I would say I don't find that problematic within our survey, in the sense that if that is an effect, it is happening every time we survey. So you kind of,
Right.
accept that sort of effect, but that effect will always be in every survey wave. So that change that we're observing is still valid.
Okay.
Now, I also think it's particularly interesting to ask on self-reporting. You can assume that people are overstating their attendance. What we see in our data is that most of the attendance is in weekly. It seems really unlikely to me, but others may feel differently, that there are loads of people who never go to church but are saying they go weekly, because I'm questioning why. Now, are there people who go monthly or less but feel they should go weekly and saying they're going weekly? Sure. But that's, again, they'll be doing that kind of consistently. So the question that I would want to ask is, what changed between 2018 and 2024 to make that effect greater?
Yeah.
Now, the other benefit of asking people how often they practice and relying on them to tell you is that you kind of have a sense that there may be things happening outside of what official statistics can pick up. So online church is one possibility that's been put forward. Aspiration, like, okay, I don't go weekly, but I would if I could, so I'm going to write on this survey that I do. I think that is a really powerful indicator of that Christianity still has a place, that church going is still a desirable thing and matters. So, sure, is a survey a perfect mirror to the world? Absolutely not. When taking on its own terms, it shows us big trends that we should still be really encouraged by. But all methods have their limitations. And I am really confident in the trend that these two massive data sets are showing us. I certainly don't believe that YouGov, who are the most historically cold polling company when it comes to religion, and one of the most reliable, could produce two such massive surveys that were totally off reality. These are pointing us to something important going on.
Well, I think there's a couple of really interesting points you make there. I mean, as you say, one of the issues is you're not necessarily claiming that this is giving an absolute measure, but as you've said several times, is a comparative measure. So you're seeing change from 2018, which is significant. I think it's also fair to say, especially within youth culture, it's not exactly trendy to be a Christian. I mean, I wouldn't say that the narrative we're seeing in a wider culture, I would say it's still fairly antipathetic to Christian faith at many, many levels. So as you say, there wouldn't be a kind of, especially amongst young people, a kind of social pressure to say, "Oh, I'm going to church," as if that's a social virtue. I also wonder whether there's any other sort of data or information around about the place which might also correlate with the changes that you've been seeing in terms of other survey information or other factors in culture.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's clearly a bit of a shift going on with Gen Z. Ours, I think, so far is the only one to point towards people saying that they're going to church more. We are doing it at a scale that very few others. So it might be that it's there, but people can't report on it because of margins of error. But we've seen a massive uptick in in other data sets on the number of young adults saying they believe in God, and that's come out in multiple places. What we see in our data also is this well-being and kind of life satisfaction stuff coming through. And we think that's really significant. We can see with young people across multiple measures that life is hard for them. The world that they're inheriting is difficult. And I think there is a bit of a sense that, they're searching for meaning, they're searching for answers, they're searching for healing. Particularly young men, which comes through very strongly in our data, again, perhaps surprisingly strong. But is it a surprise to me that they would be finding that in church or, religion? I mean, absolutely not. I think, we would expect that. So, yeah, our data is not anomalous by any means. And it is very much as part of a trend in data that there is clearly a shift going on, and that shift is focused among the young at the moment. Now, we say in the report, we don't know how long this is going to last for. Like it could be a bubble. A survey is only ever a moment in time, but it is a really interesting moment in time, and it's so great to see the church kind of discussing, what does this mean for us?
Another data point, I think, which was reported a couple of weeks ago, was about young people's interest in buying and reading the Bible as well, which would also correlate among others.
Yeah, absolutely. Some really good data there. And again, our own data is showing that, young people at something like 30, I think it's 37% of 18 to 24s are interested in learning more about the Bible, which just outstrips any other age group, which is amazing. Certainly not what we were seeing in 2018. And that when you take the churchgoers out of that and you only look at young non-churchgoers, their interest is still the highest of any other non-church-going age groups. So yeah, real curiosity there. And I think one of the things that we'd been hearing as Bible Society prior to doing the survey was that we were hearing a lot on the ground about church leaders saying, I am getting a lot of curiosity from young people. Even some people saying, I've got young people coming in and they feel quite formed. They've clearly been looking up stuff online. And we've been hearing that for a while. I was a bit like, oh, okay, show me the data.
Yes.
And then it's come through. So
that's always going to be your line, isn't it, Rhiannon? Show me the data.
And researchers, people, even people like me, we will always want another data point. I would have loved to be able to rerun the survey just to see what happened on the next run. Unfortunately, we have the data we have, but it didn't feel bizarre to us that the survey was pointing to something that other people are experiencing. And obviously since the survey's come out, we've had a lot of people saying that's not going on in my church. We've had many saying that absolutely is going on in my church. We called it the quiet revival because it's, even at the numbers that we're reporting, this is not a flood. You would not be necessarily noticing an outpouring on the streets. This could be, 5 new people over a few years coming through the threshold. That's not, obviously accounting for the idea that there are people exploring faith in other ways. Back to what we were talking about earlier, the way they interpret a church service, we're not in control of that. We do our best to tighten it in the survey. We make it very clear we mean a Christian church, all of these kind of things. But it could be, that growth is happening in kind of unexpected places. Universities is one of them. I don't know about cathedrals, home churches, online churches, all of this stuff. Yeah.
That's fascinating, because one of the things that I often do when I'm talking to people about church growth and about the New Testament vision of mission is I say to them, at the time of the most explosive growth in history of the church, which is in the early centuries, how fast did the church grow? And people sort of think, 10 or 20%. No. Rodney Stark did a sociological analysis of the numbers, and he pointed out that over a couple of hundred years, the average church growth was 3.54% a year.
Right.
Now that was the most radical, world-changing growth of all. So, as you say, it's quiet. The question is, as you say, is it going to continue? So, if the church grows at 1 or 20%, that's fine. If it does it for 10 years, you're going to be doubled in size, over that period. So it's about
Right.
sustaining it. Yeah.
Exactly, and we very much believe that our figures are pointing to a truth, and that there's interest among young people. So the key thing that we get to it towards the end of the report, and I'm not sure how many people got past the first chapter, is that there is discipleship need. These young Christians that we see are showing tremendous enthusiasm, interest in the Bible, high faith confidence. But there are some warning signs as well. They among churchgoers, younger churchgoers are more likely to say that they struggle to find people to learn from. They struggle to find appropriate resources around the
Oh,
Bible. So if we're kind of looking at sustainable growth, we do need to be putting in kind of the work now. I would say it's not a done deal, and it kind of could not only fail to continue to grow, but it could kind of reverse. That would be a possibility. So, we see kind of clear indications in the data of a really positive story, but not a complacent story by any means. But there is real opportunity, I think I would say.
now this is a moment to mention that Bible Society themselves are producing some pretty good resources on this, including the Bible course, aren't you?
Yes,
Quick plug for you
absolutely.
there.
Thank you so much. The new edition of the Bible course is set to launch in the next few weeks. My other role that's not research is impact measurement. So my team look
Right.
at the effectiveness of our resources. The Bible course we have done a lot of work on, and it shows real evidence of change, growing what we call Bible confidence. So people's confidence to navigate the Bible, to see how it all fits together, to help themselves identify their role in the story of Scripture. The new one is great. It's been updated, new resources, new videos. It's great for new Christians, and it's great for lifelong Christians as well. Everyone seems to get something positive out of it. So please do check it out.
The other great resource as well, which is not a Bible Society one, is the Bible Project and their videos on
Yes.
YouTube.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it's interesting that you talk about the signs of interest and signs of hunger as well as the resourcing. And I think the Bible Project is also a sign of that, in that its popularity has just taken off massively in the last couple of years, I think. And now Bible Project are doing some collaborations with a number of organizations in the UK as well. But
Yeah.
also it's about feeding that hunger on the fringes. I was just on holiday and traveled with a group of folk and had with 4 different people had conversations about their interest in the Bible, and I said, look at the Bible Project resources here. And they said,
Yeah.
well, that's great. I'm going to go home and I'm going to look at that. So it's not
Yeah.
the first time I've talked to people who are on the fringes of faith who actually say this is a really fascinating way into exploring the message
Yeah.
of Scripture.
Yeah, absolutely. The Bible, we have to be honest. In our survey, the vast majority of people are not interested in learning more about the Bible. But where we do see pockets, we do see kind of increased interest and an openness to explore it again. And I would say that our wider research shows that people who aren't familiar with the Bible, they can get a lot out of it. And I think sometimes we fear that you can't put Scripture in front of people, but we have to be prepared that what comes out might be challenging, and
It's
our
going to raise
wider,
questions which we need
it's
to
going to raise
address.
questions that could be hard for lifelong Christians who's perhaps never kind of confronted them. I think the key thing is we don't have to have all the answers, and we have to be brave enough to not have all the answers as well. The thing that we know puts non-Christians off reading the Bible more than anything is a fear that Christians are going to tell them they're wrong or preach at them or something like that, but can be open to exploring the Bible on their terms and its own terms.
Now, this survey and the responses, it's been unusual for you because, of course, you didn't join the Bible Society in order to become a media star, but as a researcher. So this has put the spotlight on you. Have you been surprised by some of the reactions? I mean, some have been very positive. Some reactions have actually been quite sort of cautious, almost negative to it as well. Has that taken you by surprise?
We're delighted with the response, and we are really delighted with the amount of conversation that's going on. I'm in no way surprised about the diversity of opinion on it. In my role, I have to be a skeptic as well, and would very much, if I was in another position, probably be like, right, let's dissect this thing and see how it holds up. As researchers, we welcome that. And, we wanted to put it out there in the world. We didn't know if others perhaps had similar data and perhaps were sitting on it because they weren't sure about it. You kind of have to put it out there and see what comes back. But also because it is the data we have. We believe it to be robust, and we believe it to be pointing to something of truth in the world. So yeah, it's kind of been really wonderful in a way. As we were wrestling with the data, it surprised us when it came in, and like I said earlier, I wrestled back with you, Garth. Like we did go through it quite a bit, but to kind of almost crowdsource responses to it is really cool. So I'm walking away with loads more ideas for what to do next, and sort of thank everyone for approaching it with a willingness to discuss it. And it's, for the most part, been really friendly conversation as well. So that's been great.
Good.
We've always got more questions.
Of course, that's great.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'd be out of a job. But yeah. Just going back to the shaping of things, you've talked about some really interesting things about the shift to a growth and interest in faith and the church attendance amongst men compared with women, which is fascinating. You also in the report mention the diversity of those who are engaging who report going to church more often. There's also, now I know this is a bit of a cautious issue for Bible side, there's also a shift around inherited congregation traditions and new churches, because of course many of the historic denominations are in decline. So there does seem to be a shift towards new churches, I think, as well. But also there's been comment about full fat faith. I mean, you hinted about this too, that actually there's, in your comments earlier, that people are drawn to faith where there's a radical challenge and there's a stepping away from some of the values of our culture. What insights did you get from the survey in those sort of areas?
Yeah, I think this is one of those areas where I would want to dig in with some really good interviews with people to really understand what's going on. One of the interesting things we see in the data is what looks to be quite a significant increase in Catholicism. And we had also been hearing anecdotally, it's not shown up in our data because our survey, even though it's big, is not big enough. But we've heard a lot about interest in the Orthodox Church from young people, particularly young men. And I know that others have done more work on that. So that's quite interesting to us. The church.
I mean, it's interesting because quite often we're told that we have to sort of reduce the cultural distance between, where people are and faith. And actually, those are traditions where they say they make no effort at all to reduce the cultural difference. The church, being in church is quite a distinct culture from what people are used to.
It is, and I think what we see in our data is kind of community matters, so sense of being some part of something. I wonder around that if there's an interest in looking for authenticity. But one thing we've been wondering is there's something about a search for experience, because in our data we've got this kind of Catholicism streak and we've got this Pentecostal streak, and both of them are quite sensory, I would say. So around Bible, we're interested in the idea of Bible confidence being head, heart and hands. And I wonder if there's a similarity with faith that there is perhaps, and I have to say that our data is not going to be the final word on this, but faith traditions that are experiential, I think perhaps might be what I would lean into. When it came down to individual churches, I think it's going to be those that feel really welcoming, have space for questions, connection. I think the young men in our data particularly showing something around feeling close to people in their local area. So churches that feel connected, I think will probably be doing a bit better. But this is definitely one of those more research needed kind of things, and we can't speak to future growth and future trend.
Yeah. I mean, just coming back to the reliability of the result, that also correlates with the fact that, the headlines have always been, church in terminal decline kind of thing. And when I'm doing things in the media, I point out saying, well, okay, that the historic denominations are the ones who are good at collecting their statistics and the ones that are often in decline. And actually, as you mentioned, Pentecostalism, I don't think any Pentecostal churches actually, I mean, sometimes I don't even know how many churches they've got, let alone how many people attend.
Right.
And that would correlate with the idea that actually things are happening on the ground, which some of the headline statistics don't actually always point to.
Sure, and statistics, surveys, they give us big picture. The granular is found in other places. What I would kind of say is that I think we have another survey in field with a different polling agency just looking at Christians, because our sense in our wider work is denominational labels are not necessarily as meaningful to a typical Christian, particularly a young Christian, as we might imagine. I don't think that's necessarily the case with Catholics and Orthodox, so if I put them to one side. But our data kind of shows that the Church of England is reasonably steady, if not maybe a little bit bigger than the Church's own stats suggest it should be. It would not surprise me if people are ticking the Church of England box and not going to a Church of England church, either because they're not sure on the difference, particularly perhaps younger people who might not have that kind of religious literacy. Or I do know many people in my personal life who don't go to a Church of England church, but grew up in that. And so our question is not, the question on the survey is not what denomination of a church do you go to, is what denomination do you identify with? And, it might well be that in our data, people are ticking that. I don't know whether that's good or bad news for the Church of England, but I would just say that it is reasonably difficult to track, especially when you're getting into surveys. We have things like new churches, evangelical churches, all of that listed. I don't think people easily identify into those. I think denominational labels are they're just quite loose for most Christians, and we do want to do further work to tighten that up a bit.
Yeah. Well, it's been really fascinating to talk to you, Rhiannon. And just to finish with, could you just call out for me, summarize what you think from the survey are the key encouragements for Christians and for church leaders to take away, and what you think the key challenges are?
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, I think we are entering a period of change. That inevitable decline of the church, I think we can start to really question that and challenge it. I think we can be encouraged. We know from wider research that churches that grow are churches that plan to grow. There is openness in the population, particularly among younger people who are probably approaching the Bible and Christianity with perhaps less cultural baggage than previous generations, who are open to learning more, finding meaning. And I would say that churches should be encouraged by the good work that they're doing. Church communities in our data seem to be doing well, making a difference in individual lives and to their communities. So, there is change in the air, and to be encouraged and to make the most of the opportunity for that. In terms of the challenge, it is about seizing the moment, right? Like this is, as I've said, a moment in time. We think it's a really powerful and exciting moment. But it's got to be grasped. It's got to be acted on. And the Bible has to be at the center of that for churches. So, if you are experiencing these young people exploring, or indeed older adults, we see that in the data too, start up those conversations and be prepared for difficult questions. You don't need to have all the answers, but plan for discipleship, I would say. Yeah.
I love that comment you made there, that churches that grow are churches that plan to grow. And churches that make disciples are churches that plan to make disciples around engagement with Scripture. So that's
absolutely
wonderful.
Absolutely.
Friends, thank you very much for joining us. Great to see you. Dr. Rhiannon McAleer, thank you for joining us. And we continue to pray for and encourage you in your work. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.